What is NOC in Dubai and the UAE? In the world of business and immigration, a document called NOC, No Objection Certificate, plays an important role, especially in countries like the UAE. This document can be the key to many opportunities. Whether it is buying real estate, obtaining a resident visa, or starting a new business. In this article we will take a closer look at what a NOC is, how to obtain one, who are the issuers of a NOC, and what changes in UAE legislation affect the process of obtaining one. What is NOC? A NOC, or No Objection Certificate, is a document that certifies that a certain person or organization has no objections or obstacles to a certain action or procedure. In the UAE, this document is often required for various transactions such as buying real estate, obtaining a resident visa, or starting a business. In the history of the UAE, the concept of NOC appeared not so long ago. However, over time, its importance and impact on life and business in the country has grown significantly. Today, NOC is an integral part of most legal and commercial transactions in the UAE. An NOC is usually required to confirm consent to a particular transaction or action. This could be, for example, consent to transfer an employee to another company, consent to sell real estate, or consent to start construction. An NOC may also be required to confirm that there are no debts owed to a particular organization or person. It is important to note that the NOC is not just a formality. It is an important document that can have serious consequences in case of its absence. For example, the absence of a NOC can lead to denial of a visa, or to problems in real estate transactions. Therefore, if you need a NOC, it is important to find out in advance how to obtain one and what documents will be required. How to get a NOC in the UAE. Obtaining a NOC in the UAE is a process that can be a bit complicated. But with the right approach and preparation, it can be simplified. Here is a step-by-step guide to obtaining a NOC. It is important to remember that the requirements for documents and the procedure for obtaining a NOC may differ from issuer to issuer. Therefore, before applying for a NOC, it is recommended to check all details with the relevant organization. NOC issuers. NOC, or No Objection Certificate, is important a document in the UAE which can be issued by a variety of organizations and individuals. It is important to understand that the issuer of a NOC depends on the specific situation and purpose for which the document is required. In the UAE, issuers of NOCs are typically government organizations. In many cases, government organizations issue NOCs to authorize various actions and procedures related to business, immigration, or law. This may include actions such as starting a new business, obtaining a resident visa, or changing jobs. Commercial organizations. In some cases, commercial organizations may issue NOCs. This may be necessary, for example, when moving to a new job, when an employee must provide a NOC from their previous employer. Private individuals. In some circumstances, individuals can issue a NOC. For example, when renting or buying a property, the owner or developer may issue a NOC to show that they have no objection to the transaction. However, it is worth noting that in some cases, NOCs can only be issued by certain organizations or individuals. For example, when purchasing UAE real estate, a NOC is usually issued by the developer. This document confirms that the developer has no objection to the sale of the property to a particular buyer. Thus, it is important to know who should issue the NOC in your particular case in order to properly apply for and successfully obtain this document. NOC for different purposes. NOC in UAE can be used for a variety of purposes. Here is a detailed overview. These are just some of the examples of when a NOC is required. It is important to remember that requirements may vary depending on the specific situation and UAE legislation. Changes in legislation. UAE legislation is constantly changing, and this affects the process of obtaining a NOC. Recent changes to the rules for issuing NOCs are aimed at simplifying the process and reducing bureaucracy. This makes it possible to do UAE business more attractive and accessible to foreign investors and entrepreneurs. One example of such changes is the change in the procedure for obtaining a resident visa. Previously, an NOC from all family members was required to obtain a resident visa. But with the recent changes, this document is now only required from the head of the family. This greatly simplifies the visa application process for foreigners, as it reduces the number of documents required and decreases the waiting time. In addition, in some cases, changes have been introduced that allow NOCs to be obtained online. This not only speeds up the process of obtaining the document, but also makes it more convenient, as applicants can apply for an NOC from anywhere in the world. It is important to note that despite all these changes, obtaining a NOC still requires thorough preparation and knowledge of local legislation. Therefore, if you are planning to obtain a NOC in the UAE, it is recommended that you seek the assistance of professionals in this field. Potential problems and how to avoid them. Obtaining a NOC in the UAE can face a number of challenges. One of the most common is an incomplete understanding of the process and requirements. To avoid this problem, it is important to thoroughly understand all the requirements and procedures involved in obtaining a NOC. Another common problem is not filling in the NOC application form correctly. To avoid this, it is advisable to read all instructions carefully and, if possible, consult an expert. It is also important to remember that some organizations may require certain additional documents or information. Therefore, it is important to always be prepared to provide all necessary documents. In conclusion, the NOC is an important document that can open up many opportunities in the UAE. Whether it is buying real estate, obtaining a resident visa, or starting a business, a NOC can make all these processes much easier and faster.